Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going on a pretty incredible journey. We're going to start all the way down in the darkest depths of the ocean floor and rise right up to the absolute highest levels of global geopolitical strategy. We are looking at the incredibly high-stakes race to completely rewire the Indo-Pacific.
Think about how you're streaming this exact explainer right now. You're probably picturing your data, floating invisibly through the cloud or maybe bouncing off some high-tech satellites up in space. But here is a truly mind-blowing reality. 95% of all international data traffic physically travels through massive cables resting right on the ocean floor. It's this entirely hidden underwater web that serves as the literal backbone of our modern world.
Okay, let's dive into this because recently a massive, historic milestone was hit. Working alongside global partners, Australia helped ensure that all Pacific Islands Forum, or PIF members, are now officially connected to undersea telecommunications cables for the very first time. It is a monumental achievement. We're talking about physically wiring an entire vast region into the global digital economy.
So to understand exactly how we got here, we're going to break this down into 6 quick parts: the hidden underwater web, the Pacific connectivity problem, the geopolitical cable race, connecting every PIF member, building essential digital redundancy, and finally, a resilient regional future. Starting with part 1, the hidden underwater web and the physical arteries of our digital world. Let's look at what these cables are actually replacing.
See, for years, a lot of Pacific nations had to rely entirely on satellite internet. And satellites have some pretty major limitations when you're trying to run an entire nation on them. They're expensive, the bandwidth is heavily limited, and they are notoriously vulnerable to bad weather. Subsea cables, on the other hand, absolute game changers. A single modern fiber optic cable can deliver enormous capacity, like 20 terabits per second. They are highly reliable, way more affordable in the long run, and they really are the true arteries of our internet.
Which brings us to part 2, the Pacific connectivity problem. The Pacific isn't just large. Its geography makes building infrastructure incredibly challenging. The scale we're talking about here is just staggering. To simply connect Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea and Honiara in the Solomon Islands to the major internet hub down in Sydney, it requires 4,700 kilometers of fiber optic cable. These tiny island nations are separated by literally millions of square miles of open ocean. So you can imagine, the logistics and the sheer expense of wiring them up is incredibly daunting for any private company to tackle alone.
Moving on to part 3, the geopolitical cable race. Because it's not just about logistics and development, right? It's actually deeply tied to international security. Right beneath the surface of all this infrastructure development is a really high-stakes digital security race among major global players. Let's look at how fast things shifted chronologically. Back in 2017, the Solomon Islands actually awarded their cable contract to the Chinese firm Huawei. But then, by 2018, citing security concerns regarding critical communications infrastructure, the Australian government intervened. They decided to jointly fund an alternative proposal by the Australia-based Vocus Group. Then, as global tensions kept evolving, the U.S. launched the Clean Network Initiative in 2020, which effectively banned new cables from directly connecting China and the U.S. mainland. And by 2023, you had the Quad Partnership, bringing together Australia, India, Japan, and the U.S., launching a joint effort to address cable connectivity and resilience. It just shows how rapidly security concerns completely shifted the landscape of who builds and manages this vital infrastructure. But get this, nation-states aren't the only ones shaking up this space. You might assume traditional national telecommunications companies dominate the ocean floor, right? Well, today, hyperscalers, we're talking major tech giants like Google, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft, they are the ones driving the industry. They now purchase roughly 66% of global subsea cable capacity, leaving traditional telecoms with just 34%. Big tech is literally rewriting the commercial realities of cable construction. All right, part 4, connecting every PIF member. Let's zoom back in to see the specific real-world results out in the Pacific. As we touched on earlier, every single Pacific Islands Forum member is now officially connected. And doing that meant delivering over 10,300 kilometers of brand new cable interconnectivity across 9 different countries. Primary connections have now been achieved for nations including Nauru, the Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, Tarawa and Kiribati, and Kosrae in the Federated States of Micronesia. A really great example of what this actually means on the ground is Timor-Leste. They just activated their very first International Submarine Cable, the TLSSC. It runs for 607 kilometers, and it finally breaks their expensive dependency on satellite internet. This opens up vast, real-world opportunities for things like digital education and telemedicine. And this brilliantly illustrates how this wasn't a solo mission. Australia didn't do this alone. It took a massive, multinational coalition. While Australia provided project leadership and over $500 million in funding via the AIFFP, they worked side by side with global partners. Japan partnered on the Palau and East Micronesia cables. The United States co-funded those same Palau and East Micronesia projects, plus the South Pacific Connect initiative. New Zealand stepped up to co-fund the Hawaii-Tonga cable, and Taiwan has served as a key general development partner. It is a highly coordinated, multinational effort to wire a region. This coordination also translates into a genuine economic partnership. For example, with the Coral Sea Cable and its domestic networks, there's a 2/3 to 1/3 funding split. Australia provided 2/3 of the funding, and the partner nations themselves, like the Solomon Islands or Papua New Guinea, provided the remaining 1/3. It proves this is a real economic partnership. These Pacific nations own a significant vested stake in their own infrastructure. It's not just a one-way delivery of aid. That brings us to part 5, building essential digital redundancy. Because, getting connected for the very first time is really just the beginning. Pacific Island nations are geographically highly vulnerable to natural disasters. That makes having a single point of digital failure incredibly dangerous. Consider this devastating reality. In January 2022, a massive volcanic eruption damaged both the international Tonga cable and Tonga's sole domestic subsea cable. This made the entire nation highly vulnerable to complete internet disruptions. Literally, when your only fiber optic link to the outside world snaps, your entire country goes dark. And that is exactly why secondary connections, what we call digital redundancy, are quite literally a matter of national survival. Australia and its development partners are now actively strengthening telecommunications reliability by funding second international cable connections. This rollout includes crucial secondary links for Tonga, Papua New Guinea, Palau, and the Solomon Islands. Just recently, BW Digital successfully landed Tonga's second international subsea cable, the Hawaii-Tonga, which directly links them to a major trans-Pacific system. If one cable goes down, these nations finally have a backup lifeline. Finally, part 6, a resilient regional future. Let's zoom out for one last macro look at the long-term impact of all this infrastructure. So the crucial point you should take away from all of this is that Australia's commitment of over $500 million since 2018 isn't just about dropping wires in the sand. Along with partners like Japan, the US, and New Zealand, they are laying the literal, physical foundation for a modern, digitally integrated Indo-Pacific economy. Over 10,300 kilometers of new cable means faster, much more affordable services that integrate economies, boost digital sovereignty, and allow isolated nations to fully participate in global trade. Which brings us to a final thought to leave you with today. With the Pacific Islands finally wired for the modern era, how will this completely new digital nervous system shift the economic and strategic center of gravity in the Indo-Pacific over the next decade? It's a fascinating question, and one with massive implications for global trade, security, and geopolitics. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning what lies beneath the surface.